officially the European Union and the Commission says that they want to protect the borders against illegal migration. But in practice, I realized that there is some, disagreement among the Brussels institutions. I realized that for some NGOs and unfortunately for some parts of Commission services and Commissioner Johansson, as I said, was in my eyes a sort of spokesperson of the NGOs, pro-migrant NGOs.
Hello again, my name is Justin Stairs and this is the Brussels Signal Studio. We're very happy to have today Fabrice Leggeri with us. Thank you for coming to the office, Mr. Leggeri. And he is a MEP, a Euro MP from France. He is a member of the National Rally Party, which is traditionally associated with Marine Le Pen. Now also you have the rising star Jordan Bardella, who we heard a lot about before the French elections. A right-wing party, some people would say a hard right party even. And here in Brussels, in the European Parliament, you and your party are part of the newly formed Patriots group. And there's something else, of course, that I should mention before we start. You are special in that you are all the former head of the Frontex agency, and Frontex is the EU agency designed to help protect European Union borders. Now, I should perhaps point out that it works in conjunction with the member states, right? It is not solely responsible. In fact, it helps the member states. That is correct, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So let's start. I mean, obviously, given that you have a lot of experience with the migration issue, the migration crisis, we could say, I will obviously be quizzing you on that subject. Given your time at Frontex, your 7 years at Frontex, you have a certain perspective on the migration crisis. What did you learn from that time and why did you decide to become a politician, please?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. During my time as Executive Director of Frontex, the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, that's the official name, but what I learned is that officially the European Union and the Commission says that they want to protect the borders against illegal migration. But in practice, I realized that there is some, disagreement among the Brussels institutions. Usually you have the Council and therefore the Member States who usually want to protect the borders against illegal migration, against organized crime, terrorism, trafficking, drugs trafficking. So many threats that may affect external borders. While the Commission, and in particular, the Commissioner Ylva Johansson, in charge of migration and home affairs, was closer to the NGOs, the pro-migrants NGOs, than closer to the member states or to the police forces. So what I learned is that, in fact, when you are sort of civil servant, because this is what I was as executive director of the agency. I was appointed by a management board. I had to comply with the rules of civil servants. And what I realized is that when there is no political support from the top, and in this case it meant no political support really and sincerely to protect the borders, then you cannot act. So I could give examples of situations where...
Why not? Go on, give us an example.
Yeah, for example, you have this, you can hear this constant slogan about pushbacks. So the NGOs, they say that everything is a pushback. If you look at this, it's not a legal concept. You will never find this in any kind of EU legislation. but NGOs say it's a pushback. For example, they say, a person traveled by plane, arrived at the airport, and was then pushed back. Why? Because the person didn't have a passport, no valid visa, and in this case, it's a decision of non-entry. It's a non-entry decision. It's just that you are not admitted. But they say everywhere pushback. Of course.
But by that, they mean sent back to their home country sent to another country.
In fact, I realized that for some NGOs and unfortunately for some parts of Commission services and, Commissioner Johansson, as I said, was in my eyes a sort of spokesperson of the NGOs, pro-migrants NGOs. They considered that everybody has a fundamental right to enter the European Union. Then even if it's an illegal crossing of the external borders, they say, you are not allowed to stop them. So that's what they mean when they say pushbacks. So according to them, border guards are not allowed to stop illegal migrants when they detect. Okay, they can detect, but then they are not allowed to stop them, and they should let them in. I was even told by the commissioner in 2019, that was our first talk together, as she had freshly been appointed commissioner. She said, but why does the European Border and Coast Guard need uniforms, weapons? Because your job, and she was talking to me, your job, so Border Guard's job, is to welcome migrants. To welcome migrants. And you don't need weapons, you don't need uniforms, you just need to welcome them. And she added, that was in 2019, Europe is an aging continent, so we have to welcome migrants.
Okay.
So you see, that's the background, that's the political background. I must say, I was shocked because when I started as executive director of Frontex in 2015, I made a European tour to introduce myself to all national authorities because they have voting rights in Frontex Management Board. And I wanted somehow to know what the voters, in this case national authorities, what do they expect from the agency? And they all said, you have to protect the borders, we don't want illegal migration, you have to return illegal migrants. They also wanted security and protection against organized crime, international criminality, better cooperation with Europol and with national police. So this kind of activities, this is what member states expected. But then, you can imagine 4 years later, when Commissioner Johansson started and when Ursula von der Leyen started as president of the Commission, I had the impression that this was completely weird and there was no political line anymore. Previously, I must say I was given from the Greek migration crisis that occurred in summer 2015. So from that time to, let's say, the new commission and the new commissioner, I had the feeling I was supported as executive director of Frontex. I was supported by member states. I was supported by, let's say, at least a narrative that was to say we need to stop illegal migration. I was aware that there were powerful NGOs everywhere in Brussels. I noticed that they were not happy when I started saying our job as Frontex was to build some sort of border police to support member states. And they were all saying, no, but it's about fundamental rights. So the topic was not new. My predecessor had been accused of committing pushback. So this narrative of pushbacks is in fact something that is a cultural fight that we have now to explain to our voters. Now as a politician in the European Parliament, as a member of the European Parliament, I want really our voters, our citizens, civil society to understand that in the last decade, even more, last 15 years, perhaps even more, this narrative about pushback has been developed by NGOs and by leftists to counter what they called Fortress Europe. You may remember when the Schengen free movement area was created, there were some voices on the left side of the parliament, NGOs saying, Europe is now building a fortress. And I remember that when I was executive director of Frontex, my answer to that has always been, I'm not building a fortress, I'm making the free movement area possible. And what do we see now? We see that Germany
has just reintroduced border
controls. They want to reintroduce border checks at internal borders.
Okay.
Why? Because of migration.
Okay, well, right. There's a lot to unpack there. So am I correct in summarizing that you felt supported by the national governments but not by the European Commission? Is that fair?
National governments supported me. And this is because it's a sovereign responsibility of member states to protect the border. The treaties say that the agency, the EU, can support member states, but the primary responsibility lies with the member states. And member states wanted to protect the borders against illegal migration, while more and more after let's say when Frontex became a huge agency, I could feel resistance among NGOs. And then after let's say after 2019, when Commissioner Johansson and President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, started their functions, then of course the narrative was completely different. I was not supported.
Okay. Now, I'd like to talk about pushbacks and the whole concept that you've mentioned. But before I do, perhaps you could give me an overview of the crisis and how bad it is. I mean, it's difficult to say. There are lots of statistics. We hear lots of stories. But obviously, over the course of your 7 years, for example, was there a noticeable change?
Well, I started in 2015, a couple of months before the huge crisis that hit Greece and the European Union in summer 2015.
Is this Syria?
This is Syria, but the thing is that when I visited, for example, Greece and the Greek islands and Lesbos, for example, in September 2015, there were Syrian migrants or refugees. They were very easy to recognize, in the migrants' camp, because they were quiet, they were waiting in line to be registered, and they had with them all documents and they were willing to cooperate with authorities. In the meantime, there were other nationalities pretending that they were Syrians. Many migrants, economic migrants from Maghreb countries, pretending that they are from Syria, but it was easy to recognize that they speak Arabic like people from North Africa, not like people from the Middle East. And I realized that this was a big mess, and it was, in fact, the pull factors that the European Union, because also of the weakness of its legislation, but more than that, the weakness of the mindset, perhaps the political mindset, that everyone had the feeling, now I can make it, I can enter Europe. So they used this opportunity. As a matter of fact, 1.2 million migrants entered illegally, crossed illegally the EU external borders. Almost none of them.
Well, over what period? Sorry.
In 2015.
Right.
In 2015. And almost none of them could be properly registered. Because at that time in Greece, Eurodac was not functional. Let's put it like
the database.
The database.
Yes.
So they were not registered. And there were a lot of difficulties because even when migrants were registered, there were interoperability technical issues, so that, for example, an administration in France, in Germany, in Sweden, in the Netherlands, in any other member state could not retrieve the file that had been registered in Greece.
That's an IT problem, or is that a political problem?
It was an IT problem that I could find it out, but maybe because I wanted the system to work. And then I asked questions. They said, but let's imagine I send Frontex border guards, Frontex employees there in Greece to help Greek authorities in registering the migrants, fingerprints, biometric data, and so on. And my question was, is it possible for any national administration in charge of asylum or migration in any EU member state, is it possible to retrieve the file if they have the proper equipment? And then I was answered, it depends. What? It depends. Is it a European system or not? So then there was still a lot of work to do. But let's say that the technical issues can be overcome if there is a political will. So again, I came to the conclusion, if there is a political will, then it's possible. Then you can make it.
But that was 2015.
2015.
Right, and what about 2022? Which is
and 2022, so then in 2022 there were less migrants, if I remember correctly, around 300, 400,000 illegal crossings.
Now, that's registered illegal crossings, is it? I mean, are there crossings that are not registered?
It's an assessment. It's an assessment based on the number of illegal crossings that are registered, based on certain scenarios and simulations. So it's an assessment.
It's a simulation.
Right? But it's reported by national authorities, by member states.
Okay.
But of course, they are illegal crossings that are never detected. And in order to be aware of the amount of illegal migrants, we should also take into account that some migrants arrive legally, but then they are overstayers. For example, they get a visa, a Schengen visa, but they refuse to leave.
Right.
And they overstay.
Right.
So that's another situation.
And that's not included in these
It's
figures.
not included because it's not an illegal crossing.
Illegal crossing. Okay. So, I mean, from what you've just told me, there was a particular surge as a result of the Syrian war, and by 2022, this had calmed down somewhat.
Calmed down, but it's at a higher level than, for example, 10 years before, because if you remember during the so-called Arab Spring, so then there was a surge.
Right.
And then there were voices saying, we have never reached this number of illegal crossings, which was correct at that time. And then after the 2015 crisis, when the figures were going down, there were voices saying, oh, we are back at the normal level of the Arab Spring, which was a record at that time.
Right.
So which means that there is a structural increase of the migration pressure. And I think this is something that politicians have to take into account to realize that we must protect the borders, because otherwise everything is damaged. Social life, society is deeply changed, because whether it's legal or illegal, the result is that society is changing, and that, in fact, national authorities, our democratic societies have never decided that they want such an influx of migrants. In France, the country where I come from, we have never been asked as citizens, as voters, if we want this migration.
And this is one of the reasons why you decided to become a politician.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Now, there are a couple of technical terms I would like to drill down into with the help of your expertise. Okay. Now, one of them is pushbacks, and the other one is pull factor. We hear these terms a lot now. a pushback, I've been told, is illegal. Is that true?
Well, in fact, there is no definition of a pushback. In reality, the Schengen Border Code, which is EU legislation, says that member states must, in fact, avoid or that they are illegal crossings. So they have to protect the borders in their own national interest, but also in the interest of all the Schengen and EU member states. And there are provisions in the Schengen Border Code saying that the persons who cross illegally should be sanctioned. So, on the other hand, of course, NGOs and Commissioner Johansson and Commission people saying that in fact we don't know if these illegal migrants, illegally crossing persons, are not asylum seekers.
Right.
So we should give them the possibility to claim, to lodge an asylum application. And then we will see. And then if they are not accepted as, not granted the refugee status, then the European Union will make sure that they are returned back. But we know that this doesn't work. So,
but it doesn't work, or it's illegal. I mean, does everyone have the right legally to make an asylum claim if they cross the border illegally or not?
In fact, normally there are ways to cross the borders. They could show up at border crossing points, legal border crossing point, and say, I'm a person in need of international protection. I would like to lodge an asylum application.
Okay.
But why do they try to enter illegally? And for example, there was even a jurisprudence from, and that's surprising, but from the European Court of Human Rights that decided in February 2020 that Spain was right when Spanish authorities pushed back, as NGOs say, rejected immediately a group of 200 or 300 migrants that stormed the fence, the Spanish fence in Ceuta. So that's the border between the land
enclave,
border, between Morocco and the Spanish enclave. And can you imagine, even the European Court of Human Rights decided that it was not correct to storm the fence, and migrants or people in need of international protection would have been able to lodge an asylum application peacefully at the border crossing point.
So why did they not make asylum claims at the legal?
Because in fact they are not interested in the asylum application.
You're saying they're economic migrants.
They are economic migrants. Okay. They are interested in the right to stay. Well, the refugee status, they know that most of them are not qualified. They don't qualify.
Okay, because they don't qualify. Okay, I get it. Right. Now, the other term let's talk about is the pull factor. Now, according to what I've seen written in the press, your successor, a man by the name of Hans Leitens, says that the NGO rescue boats, controversial craft who actually rescue people from the sea, they do not represent a pull factor, because the argument goes that migrants are aware that these NGO boats are around, and therefore they're more likely to attempt a crossing in the hope of being rescued. And therefore, some say these rescue boats are a pull factor. And this is one of the pull factors, I guess. And do you think the rescue boats are a pull factor?
I think of course, there is an obligation, a moral obligation, and of course even a legal obligation. But let's say a moral obligation to rescue persons in distress at sea. But what does international law say about that? The law of the sea says that in every region of the world, this includes the Mediterranean area, coastal states are in charge of maritime rescue zone. And after 2018, Libya, the government in Tripoli, declared a Libyan rescue zone. And this was declared in the International Maritime Organization. This was not challenged by any member of the organization. So that means no state challenged the possibility for Libya to establish a maritime rescue zone. As a consequence, this Libyan government is the only legal authority that is competent to organize and coordinate rescue operations in that Libyan rescue zone.
Even if they don't have many vessels.
And then the law of the sea says, if, for example, boats or, for example, Frontex that was in the area had the possibility to detect and to spot people in distress from planes or from drones. So we could then assess that there was a situation that required action. But then if it's in the Libyan rescue zone or in the Tunisian rescue zone, then the first coastal state that is competent, that should be first asked to act, is Libya in this case. So NGOs don't agree with the international law. They say, in any case, Libyan Coast Guard should never be involved because Libya is not the right place to return migrants. But we have to see the difference between what is the right place to handle or to host migrants and in which conditions are they then let's say handled in Libya. That's one point. But the other point is the international law. And international law says that only states can act.
Right.
So NGOs...
But you could argue there's not much of a Libyan state at the moment,
but the issue is that there is a Libyan Coast Guard that was funded
by the EU.
By the European Union.
Right.
The rescue coordination center based in Tripoli was paid by the European Commission. That was before 2019, so that was before Commissioner Johansson and President von der Leyen. But anyway, this was funded, and I remember it was more than 45 million euro funding the Libyan Coast Guard and the Libyan Coordination Center, which is in line with international law. Then NGOs claim that they should be the ones called by other Coast Guard or by Frontex to be, in fact, the authorities in charge of rescue in the Central Med. So my successor says it's not a pull factor. I can simply repeat what I said in 2017. So that was before I was a politician. At that time, in 2017, I was executive director of Frontex. And I said, and this would made some noise in the Financial Times, we should strike the right balance between rescuing person, of course, and sending boats in the vicinity, and protecting the border, but not, let's say, fueling the criminal business. And that's the controversial point. And I think that's important to realize that the more criminals can tell migrants, so migrants are the victims in this case, the more criminal networks can develop the narrative, oh, you pay, you migrants, potential migrants, you pay the criminal networks. The criminal networks will bring you with a dinghy to the area where usually European boats come. And then it's given for sure you will get you will be rescued and you will be brought to the European Union, because in the European Union they have such a rule that when they rescue somebody in the Mediterranean Sea, they bring them to the European Union.
Okay, but with respect, sir, my question was, do you think that these NGR boats are a pull factor? It sounds like you do, but you haven't actually said it.
I think there should be, at that time, there should be, we were saying that there should be a code of conduct and that they should comply with the rules. And again, there is no legal vacuum because NGOs pretend that and say that there is a legal vacuum. There is no legal vacuum. The law of the sea says that if anybody can help the coordinating state, so the coastal state, which is in charge of coordinating the rescue operations, can request, can demand that anybody passing by help with the boat, with the plane.
So it's up to the coordinating state to decide.
The coordinating state could request that the NGO supports the action which is coordinated by the coastal state.
Right.
But then that means that the NGOs have to comply with the instructions. They are not entitled to do whatever they want to do. They are not allowed to be militants and to do politics. They have to comply with the instructions.
Right. No, I understand that.
The
But
operational
obviously, but
instructions.
now that you're a politician and you're freer to speak than you were when you were a civil servant, I was hoping that you would say whether or not you regard them as a pull factor.
I think they created a business. They
The
create
NGO ships help.
The NGOs created at least a sense of urgency to because that in fact they need it's about fundraising. And I remember in 2017 when I made this statement, there were some NGOs complaining that because of my statement, they were losing funds. So that's about fundraising.
So you're saying they're part of this people smuggling business? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that they are necessarily involved in the criminal networks or but they help the smuggling activities. I mean, there are different legs of the trip. So first leg is criminal networks in the countries of origin. So then the smugglers, that's the last leg before the trip enters in a sort of gray zone where you cannot say it's completely illegal or criminal. It's something different. It's a distress situation and you don't have time to think about it, to analyze. Of course, because it's a distress, you need to urgently act and to rescue them. And you think later. And later, what can you see? That NGOs say, oh, there are no official coast guards. So member states, EU member states are doing nothing. Frontex is doing nothing. Or they accuse member states and Frontex to cooperate with, let's say, neighboring non-EU countries. And then they say, we, the NGOs, we are the only ones who really want to rescue the person, which is not correct because I can also say that every year there were thousands of rescue situations and member states, coastal member states and Frontex under my leadership cooperated and rescued people. But the only thing is that the narrative of the NGOs is that they say that they know better where the migrants should go. And then now if we see this asylum and migration pact that was proposed,
I was going to ask about this. Is the solution,
and it's not the
EU
solution. It's just the last leg of the trip. So at the beginning you have the criminal networks in the countries of origin. Then you have the smugglers, let's say kind of operational facilitators. And then they put the people on the dinghies and push the dinghies. And then at some point they are European boats rescuing. And then European boats bringing the migrants to Europe. And then you have last leg of the trip, you have the Asylum Migration Pact forcing member states to legalize what is an illegal crossing of the border. the Asylum and Migration Pact is about relocating migrants which are disembarked usually in the south, in Italy, in Greece, Spain, maybe some other states, but usually in the south of Europe, and then to relocate them across Europe.
This is the so-called burden sharing.
But that's somehow legalizing something that is at the very beginning of the process, that is a criminal network.
So you're opposed to the Migration Pact?
Yes. Yes.
What's your solution?
Well, we in the National Rally, we are very clear that people in need of international protection should have the possibility, for example, to go to our consulates, and then files could be assessed there. And if they are eligible for asylum, meaning it's really a person in need of international protection as defined by the Geneva Conventions, then that person would not be obliged to be victims of the criminal networks. And this could justify that at the external border, the European Union would enforce a very strict policy, saying and returning the person trying to cross illegally and telling them, no, it's not, you have other solutions. You can apply in any European consulate, so you don't.
How feasible is that? I mean, so you're saying you're saying that asylum claims should be made in outside of the EU. Is that right?
Yeah, in the consulates, for example, or after a distress situation, after a rescue situation, the European Union should open migrant centers in third countries. This is, for example, what Italy decided to open in Albania. So recently, in the last month,
so processing offshore somehow.
Offshore, yeah. But that's a way also to not only to protect our borders, but to protect lives.
Okay, and what about in countries such as Libya, where there's a lot of violence going on? I mean, how would this system be possible if you're a Libyan seeking to escape war, for example, or civil war, or however you want to define it?
The migrants arriving from Libya are not Libyans.
They come from elsewhere in Africa.
From other sub-Saharan countries.
Some of which are at war as well, right? There's a lot of violence at the moment in Africa.
But we are not specific in saying they should apply for the asylum in that specific consulate. They should be allowed to apply in the first safe consulate they see on their way. So it means that they would not be victims of traffickers, and then this would also put aside this excuse that and this narrative developed by NGOs and by the Commission, saying you never know, okay, they have crossed illegally the borders, but you never know, you should accept that they stay anyway until the end of the asylum application.
Okay. And so are you suggesting that this solution should be Europe-wide? I mean, you mentioned Italy and the agreement with Albania. I mean, I presume you're proposing that France should come to a similar agreement.
Yeah, because...
Or should it be a Europe-wide agreement?
The system being now a system for this European area of free movement, and National Rally wants the Schengen area to be in the interest of Europeans, but not in the interest of illegal migrants. So if at some point there is a will to have this Schengen free movement area, then the conclusion should be, and this was the conclusion made by the founders of the Schengen area, is that the external borders must be reliable and protect this European area against illegal migration, against other kind of threats. But at least when it comes to migration, it means that we should, as much as possible, keep the illegal migrants out of the space.
As much as possible. That's an interesting turn of phrase, because I'm wondering how many can be stopped. And I'm thinking in particular now about the English Channel and the UK, because you have, in theory, had a government willing to take action to stop the boats, as they say, crossing the English Channel. But it doesn't seem to have worked. I mean, to what extent is it possible to stop migrants?
Well, I must say that I liked very much this program, Stop the Boats. I think it's what the European Union should have done. But the UK, well, due to geographic circumstances, well, the neighbor of the UK is nevertheless the European Union. And what we can see is that in Calais or in the northern part of France, or probably also in Belgium, they are illegally staying migrants who seek to cross over the channel, but they entered illegally the European Union 2,000, 3,000 kilometers away from Calais. So the protection should be enforced 2,000, 3,000 kilometers upstream. So,
but is it possible to protect a long coastline? I mean, the Mediterranean coastline is very long.
I can tell you something. When I visited in 2016, I visited the U.S. Coast Guard in Florida. At that time, it was before President Trump was elected. So it was Obama. Obama was president of the United States. And I explained to the head of the regional command there in Florida, in Key West, and I explained the principles of the European Union. And he said, "Oh, guys, how can you manage your borders with this kind of bullshit?" And he told me, well, that they have this principle that if you have wet feet, meaning that migrants in the US, that if migrants have not reached the shore, they are rescued by the US Coast Guard and brought back to the point of departure. If they have dry feet, that's US law, dry feet, so that means if they have reached the shore, then okay, they are in the US and they cannot be brought back to the point of departure before there is a procedure, assessing if they are eligible for.
Okay, you're in favor of that kind of system for Europe?
I think that this shows that when there is appropriate legislation, when there is a political will, when the message is clear, if the message is that a person, a migrant that wants to enter illegally will get nothing. For example, Australia has developed successfully.
Right, but what about the UK then? Why has it not worked in the UK? Are you saying that countries like France and Belgium are letting these migrants cross?
No, it's not. It's not France and Belgium. It's the European Union that, in fact, has until now. Maybe it will change with us. But until now, the will to enforce strictly the external border is missing. So that there is no.
But it could be done. You think you can protect a border?
It could be done better. I'm not saying that it would be zero illegal crossing. Yeah. But it could be better done.
Okay. Now, I will just please allow me one more question on the pushback thing, because it seems to me that you're talking about the definitions, etc., but and let me talk about your departure from Frontex. Now, there were allegations, correct me if I'm wrong, there were allegations that Frontex turned a blind eye, is the expression, I guess, in English, to pushbacks that were happening in Greece. Now, and there was an OLAF report, which is the fraud body here in the EU, which was, I just looked through it, heavily redacted, but it suggested in that report that this kind of thing was happening. Is that true?
Well, first of all, they are legal maritime interceptions, and the law of the sea, which is also reflected by the EU regulation applying to Frontex maritime operations, says that when there is the suspicion that a boat is used for illegal activities, then national authorities, so in this case Greek Coast Guard, are allowed to intercept those boats. What does it mean? Interception needs First, it means it's not a distress situation. When a boat is sinking or is not able to move, is facing difficulties, operational difficulties, then it's a distress, then you cannot intercept. You have to rescue. But when there is no distress situation, then the interception may end up in two different options. Either national authorities want to apprehend the persons, to seize the boat. This is usually the case when there is drugs trafficking. But there is another option which is legally possible, and this is also an interception, is notifying the boat and the passengers that they are not allowed to enter national waters, or they are not allowed to stay in the national waters. And of course, for NGOs and for the Commission and for all those who don't know what is the law of the sea and what is this EU regulation, they say it's a pushback. But notifying that a boat is not allowed to enter or not allowed to stay, they say it's a pushback. And then there were also some sort of fake videos. So there was a propaganda.
Against you personally or against
me,
Frontex?
I think it was also against Frontex. It was probably against Greeks. We should never forget that there is a border dispute between Turkey and Greece. So that's also the geopolitical context. But anyway, I remember that when there was one situation that was not completely clear, I signed a letter to the minister, the Greek minister, in charge of maritime affairs, asking him, advising him to launch an investigation to clarify the situation, what happened, and if everything was in line with the principle of non-refoulement, which is a legal principle. But I'm not talking about pushback, but principle of non-refoulement. This is the Geneva Convention.
This means that people have the right to claim asylum.
I asked the advice the minister, the Greek minister, to launch an investigation, and also to make sure that at no point in time there were people in distress. So 2 months later, I got the result. And the Greek minister, signed that he could confirm that there was no breach of the principle of non-refoulement in the incident I mentioned, and there was no risk for a person, that everything had been done in compliance with the law of the sea and the normal rules for coast guards to operate. So, and then the investigators and the commission, they were saying, I was even asked, how can you trust the Greek minister? How can you trust the Greek minister? I said, pardon me, can you say it again? I don't understand what you mean.
Right, okay. Because there was this Olaf report, and after the Olaf report, you resigned, correct?
Yes, because it was politically impossible for me to carry out my mission, and because the French government, President Macron government, they wanted me to resign.
Okay.
They didn't want to support me, so that's funny to see that they pretend now that they want to, they wanted to fight against illegal immigration, but this is not. Citizens know, French citizens know, that if they want to fight against illegal migration, they have to vote for us, the National Rally.
Well, I want to ask you, in fact, about France now, because you have a new Prime Minister, Monsieur Barnier, who is very well known here in Brussels. And as I understand it, your party has given him a chance in that. Your leader, Monsieur Bardella, said, we will support you as long as you give us some concrete results and not just words, right? Is that a fair interpretation of what's going on?
Well, we don't want to block the country, so they are red lines for the National Rally. So Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella said, if it's a socialist prime minister, there was a list of criteria, and so far, Mr. Barnier seems to respect our voters, seems to be inclined to understand that there is an issue with illegal migration, that this is a problem, and this is also, there was a statement made by Marine Le Pen saying that at least Mr. Barnier seems to understand or to recognize that illegal migration is a problem for French citizens. So that's the context. But then we will see what he will propose, because Mr. Barnier, as new Prime Minister, will have to deliver a speech in the French National Assembly. And so we will judge after Mr. Barnier made the speech. So we will
see what the legal proposals are.
What is his political line?
Okay. And if you don't like it, that's it. The government falls, basically.
We don't exclude, this is what Jordan Bardella said, we don't exclude to vote against Mr. Barnier in the National Assembly in a couple of weeks or months, depending on, the budget has to be voted, or at any moment there is a procedure according to French constitutional law, making possible for the National Assembly to force the Prime Minister and all the ministers to resign. So if the mistrust is voted, so we will see.
Okay,
but we don't want to block the country. We are constructive.
Give him a chance, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any difference between RN, your party, and Reconquête on the migration issue?
Well, we are two different political parties. Let's say, I would say that we are in the mindset that we want to govern. And so we are able to address many other problems. So we have, of course, illegal migration, security, lack of security. This affects French citizens. But we are also aware that economic questions also worry the French citizens. For example, the price of electricity, agriculture. So we are very active also to address the difficulties faced by farmers. So we are a political party that really is in the mindset of governing the country.
Right, and you're suggesting, therefore, that Reconquête is not?
Well, my feeling, but maybe this is a personal feeling, is that the focus is much more and only on illegal migration, while we have the ability to cover the full spectrum of problems that the country is facing.
That's great. Fabrice Leggeri, thank you very much for coming to the studio.
You're welcome.